Thank you. Thank you very much for having provided me this opportunity. I count my experience in the telecom sector in months and make myself equal to the other speakers on the dais who count their experience in years. Therefore, I'll approach this issue from a developmental or a public policy perspective. We are a large nation and we have the advantage of large numbers. We also have the problems of large numbers. There are 240 million children in school as we speak. This is almost 70% of the population of the United States. 45 children who are born don't see the age of 2 in a group of 1,000. These are the kind of developmental challenges that we face. And that's where the Prime Minister's vision for a digital India comes in. Digital India is the vehicle, is the means towards the end. The end being the multitude developmental challenges that we face today, and the best mechanism, the best means of trying to surmount those challenges. We also have the largest pool of English-speaking, technically qualified people. I mean, our citizens who leave our shores, go abroad, do wonderfully well. The Indian American community in the United States has the largest per capita income, or the highest per capita income too. What we look forward, or what we need to look towards insofar as achieving the vision of Digital India is concerned, is the mechanics of it. The electronics of it will follow, but the mechanics of it is the bigger problem as when I see it from a public policy perspective. If we have to lay the broadband infra in this country, and if we have to lay it in one go, that means digging 1.5 million kilometers. That is the estimate that the new committee that has tried to rework the National Optical Fiber Network has recommended. 1.5 million kilometers of digging to be done in maybe 3 years, 4 years. It will be a magnificent task to achieve. Once the digging is done, the electronics, the scalability of it, the reachability will all follow. At one point in time, the National Optical Fiber Network was said to be, if I can take somebody who's lived through, has seen some of the serials that are produced in country, it was called Bharat Khod. We would have ended up digging up almost large parts of the rural countryside here. The problem from a public policy perspective is, how do we lay this infrastructure? If a business potential had existed, if a commercials had suited, then the private sector would have rushed in and laid it. We would have had to provide the requisite policy environment, but they would have rushed in to lay it. The fact is that in the rural countryside, and that's where our primary developmental challenges lie, it is not commercially viable today. That's where government comes in and works out a mechanism for funding infra. And when we look at a futuristic infra, and this will be a futuristic infra, we have to be expansive. We have to lay the infra thinking that we are laying it for the next 50 years and work out the scalability problems as we go along. We can't afford to limit our ambition to the next 5 or 10 years. That means developing the potentials to lay the infra, getting the requisite funding to do it, which, given the right environment, is not a big problem. I mean, we are a large nation, we have huge capabilities within us. It is the thought, the ambition, the design, the vision that will lead us. And the vision is contained in Digital India's vision, which was amongst the first few programs that this government cleared when they assumed office. Now, where do we go from here? The National Optical Fiber Network has reached about 25,000 gram panchayats, and we have 90, or rather at least 10 times of that number to reach still. What is the kind of time frames that we can look towards reasonably? How do we work out the pitfalls that we have noticed while we have tackled the first 25,000 GPs? How do we reinvent ourselves as we go along and do a better job than what we have done yesterday? How do we create an ecosystem that leads this infra towards better utilization, and better utilization towards an objective that serves the ambition, that fulfills the ambition and the vision that is laid down? This is one part of a large problem, but certainly we can do it, and there is a thought about how we can do it. Probably we need to refine that thought, we need to decide on that thought and take those steps forward. Insofar as our urban areas are concerned, and when I talk villages here, the diversity, I mean, anything you say about India, the opposite of it is equally true. So when I look at the rural countryside, there are villages with populations of 25,000, 30,000 in a village, and there are villages with population of 10 in a village. So this is the kind of range and the variation that you're thinking about, you're talking about when you're planning for an infrastructure that is to come up for tomorrow. While I was on the dais, I was reminded, I mean, we use this word information superhighway for this infra, and my mind went to the highway construction that happened in the United States, and not so long back I was reading about how this infrastructure came to be created in the United States. And it all was traced back to an exploration that was done by D.D. Eisenhower when he was in the army, and he was sent as part of an expedition to see how long does it take to travel from the east coast to the west coast of the US. And it was done from a military perspective as to if, and this was post World War I, that if the shores of US were to be attacked, then would it be possible for the US Army to move across the country to defend its borders? And it took him a jolly long time, and I think they had quite a few mishaps along the way too. If I remember correctly, it was somewhere close to a month that it took them to travel across from coast to coast. And at that point in time I was told that I read that road construction was under the Department of Agriculture because road construction in the rural side was seen as something that benefits agriculture produce, movement of agriculture produce. It was only after that that a Department of Roads was created. And the interstate highway came about when Mr. Eisenhower became the president in the 50s, and that's where the foundation of the highways were laid. And I think this is a great example of what an infrastructure creation actually means. It is trying to think about not what you require today, but what you do require 50 years later. And the digital infrastructure today is no less than the highways of the past. It's probably more important in today's connected world than the highways of the past were. That's the challenge for us insofar as those who are in public policy is concerned. The new report says that the only way we can go ahead and do it is when we leverage all resources that exist in the country, and that means resources that exist in the private sector, take the state government along as partners, as collaborators in this exercise, and that is exactly how it was done when we look at the highway creation in the US was also concerned. With funding to be promised by the government. And that is what we are working towards. Once the basic infra comes, and as I said earlier, the technologies will follow, and we'll scale up the technology ladder far more quickly than we are able to scale the infrastructure ladder. I would personally think that insofar as technology is concerned, and when we did the costing for the new BharatNet, the technology cost is 10% of the total infra cost. And I can design around this 10%. I can design around this 10% without seriously compromising the quality of the infra that comes up. But I should not and I cannot compromise around the 90%, because what is laid now is what is going to be there for the next 20 years, 30 years. On the cities front, our challenges are a lot different. It's not an issue of viability, it's an issue of the policy environment facilitating networks to come about. There is a business potential that exists, there is a market that exists, and as government we are looking at the measures that could be taken to facilitate this exercise. There are quite a few policy measures on the anvil. Some have been taken, some are on the anvil. A lot of thought does go into these kind of measures. Possibly there is a bit of impatience insofar as translating the vision on the ground is concerned. One can very well understand where that impatience comes from. It comes from a feeling, it comes from a need that every hour we lose, every minute we lose is a minute lost, is an hour lost. And this is true. This is true that this is something that we have to move ahead on a mission mode and get things done. I rest my case here and would be willing to interact with you at this point in time or any other further point in time. Thank you.